So thanks. Yeah, I guess you're not sick of me yet. So glad you're here. I don't want you to think that this is going to be like lunch. Actually, I'm not going to be talking most of the time. You're going to be talking. So that's why you're sitting with your nice partner there. And as I mentioned during lunch, this is focus of today, this workshop is going to be on growth mindset and really what we can do in our classrooms starting tomorrow, if you're teaching tomorrow, maybe on Monday. And before we get into the activity, if some people weren't at lunch or, I mentioned a million ideas, I'm just going to orient us back to growth mindset and fixed mindset, just so we're all on the same page. And so that's going to involve, again, going back into the classroom. So, as we're sitting in this workshop outside of teaching, just try and keep your teacher hat on and think about your students, think about yourself and your day-to-day practice. So as I spoke about during lunch, the framework of productive persistence is as follows. Our aim is to have students continue to put forth effort during challenges, and when they do so, they're using effective strategies. So again, not just about effort, but also about the strategies that go with it, about being productive, as Kate mentioned. And that we believe that there are 5 really high leverage aspects of productive persistence. And again, there are other things that might contribute, but these are what we focus on. The first is that students believe they're capable of learning, that it's even possible for them to learn in that setting. Second is that students feel socially tied to peers, faculty, the course, and the college, so that they can identify with this surrounding. Students need to also believe that the material they're learning has value, either the short term or long term or both, but some kind of value for them, and that's a huge motivator for our students. We also want students to be able to use these mindsets to act and engage in everyday behaviors. So we do focus a lot on the skills, habits, and know-how needed to succeed in a college setting. And last but not least, we want faculty in colleges to have the skills to support students' growth in their skills and mindsets. So it's not all about the students and what they need to do, but it's also reflecting and thinking, what small changes can I make that will lead to a real improvement in my classroom? And I'm going to focus again on this first driver here, is that students believe that they're capable of learning. And to get us into our classrooms, we're going to do our first bit of talking now with your new partner and talk about this. When students are faced with a challenge and are struggling unproductively, say they're spinning their wheels, it's really challenging, what do they say and what do they do? So I'm going to give you about 7 minutes with your partner to talk about both of these. What do they often say and what do they do? So go ahead, say hello to your new partner. Okay, so what are some things that you and your partner talked about? Let's focus on the first part. So what do students say when they're struggling? Yes?
It's really common that I get students come in and they say, I'm having trouble doing this graph, this question, and then I say, okay, where are you hung up?
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't started.
Yeah?
But they use that terminology, I'm having trouble, like they are in it.
Uh-huh.
But again, it's that mindset of, I don't know how to do graphs.
Mm-hmm. So I won't even start.
They don't even start.
Right, so it's a combination of say and do in that one. Yeah. Anyone else? What are some other things? Yeah.
I'm just not good at math. I'm just really bad at math.
Yeah. Anyone? I'm just not good at X. Anyone hear that? Raise some hands. I'm just not good at writing. I heard that a lot. Not good at math. But yeah, just not good at that. What else? Yeah.
I hear the teacher isn't good at it.
Here. Yes.
Then again, I don't work in the classroom. I work in
Different. But sometimes, as teachers, we might hear that too. You're like, you didn't teach me well enough. You didn't give me a chance. Putting that blame elsewhere. What else do we hear? What else do students say? Yeah.
Mine, I wish they would be more specific. They say things like, I don't get any of it.
Yep.
That's really hard to help them get started.
Yeah, I don't get any of it. It's kind of this all or nothing thinking.
Also math, by the way.
Yes, that happens a lot in math. Yeah.
She actually said this, but it's like projecting. This is stupid. So it's like pushing it away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just calling it stupid. Yeah.
There's the emotional one. I hate it. I truly hate it with a lot of passion.
I hate this. It makes sense. They're really frustrated with it. I might hate it that moment too. How about what do they do? So sometimes students won't tell us what they're thinking, but their actions might speak for that. Yeah,
We're talking about body language.
body language.
Body language of resignation,
Hmm.
body language of detachment, body language of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And detachment's obvious. You're not facing the person who's teaching or the material. Detachment can be passive or active. So you can detach by, instead of talking about the class, talking about the fraternity party or about the football game or whatever else. And resignation is that slumped shoulder thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes for me, that's the first clue I have before people say something is their body language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else pick up on body language? Anything else? So we had slumped shoulders, disengaging.
Just funny look on her face, like, are you crazy? You're looking at the teacher like,
Yeah. So facial expressions. I think so in the back said crossed arms and leaning back, sometimes bad sign. Anyone talk about just not showing up? Just voting with their feet is pretty much the most common thing that we tend to see in our networks, is that students won't even have a chance to tell you that they're struggling, they don't see a clear path to learning this, and so they'll just leave before you ever get a sense that that was really what's going on. Yeah.
So with that is misplaced anger.
Mm.
Anger that's vented at you, but really probably is on the inside as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
Or just not wanting to be found out, so
Mhm.
kind of faking it or doing a workaround.
mm-hmm. Or waiting until the very last minute until it's late. So they can have that, faking it until, they really do need to come in, where it's really critical. And so the point of this, again, is to really think about your classroom, because your students are all, you're in different disciplines, you'll see different behaviors, and maybe each class will be slightly different, but just understanding that, your students might say these things and might do these things, but it can be just from this point that they're struggling and they don't really see the way to productively struggle and productively persist in the end. And these clues, when I was teaching, I would sometimes get really angry if someone took out their phone or, they didn't listen to me and show up. But, as I taught more and more, I'm like, oh, that might be a sign that, I need to talk with them, need to maybe talk about the process of learning, just really attend to that. And so again, these are just indicators for you to think about as you're teaching in your class, to just watch your students a little more closely. Okay, so before we get in our next activity, I do again want to go over the constructs just a little bit. So I showed this graph earlier in which we asked our students, being a math person or not is something about you that you really can't change. Some people are good at math and other people aren't. And on day one, 68% of our students agreed with this statement. So 2/3, with this fixed mindset around mathematics. And just a little quiz here. Which is a better way to help students believe in themselves, to help turn around that 2/3? We could assure students that they're smart as they face challenges, or we could tell students that the brain gets smarter when it overcomes challenges. So which one do you think would be best? 2. So go Trojans. 2. Great, and so this again is just going back to Carol Dweck's theory, in which we have 2 mindsets that you can be in. It's not something that you permanently have, so unlike the conversations around grit, which seems more like a personality trait, growth mindset, fixed mindset, you can oscillate between them and you can shift students from one to another. So it is a malleable mindset in itself. But fixed mindset, just so we're on the same page, is that belief that you can't really change how intelligent you are. So no matter how hard you try, no matter what strategy you use, how many questions you ask, you will not get it unless you are natural. Or as Homer says, trying is the first step towards failure. And so if you believe you can't learn, that is what you think. On the other hand, growth mindset is again a belief that intelligence can be changed, that trying harder makes you smarter, and it's not just the amount of trying, but the quality of trying too. So trying different strategies, asking for help, you know, not only from the teacher, but from your peers as well. And what I love about growth mindset is it makes the process of learning more visible. So if we did that, then Calvin might not have these misinterpretations with his friend who is studying and giving you all a chance. And so in this, that is a common definition of smart, you know, that we think about, that you don't really see the effort behind it. Like Michael Jordan, you just see the finished product. And so Calvin no longer believes that his friend is smart. But we do think she has growth mindset. And again, the goal is somebody with a fixed mindset is to look smart. Someone with a growth mindset is to learn. Ultimately, we see that someone with growth mindset will work harder in response to challenges, using that process of learning, really exploiting what they know about the learning process, and ultimately have better grades. And we talked a little bit about teaching students about neuroscience, and specifically getting at this level of the neurons. How does that work? What's our brain actually composed of? So here are some points we usually like to cover. So the brain transfers information through a connection of neurons. So we actually know how that works. And when you try new things that are really hard, or if you just try new things that are easy a lot, the brain will make new connections to transfer that information better and faster. And we don't go into too many of the details, like the myelinated sheath, anything like that. We just want to tell them about the general process. And just remind them that you might not feel like you're learning, you know, if you have a couple difficult times. It might actually take a couple times for you to really learn something. And so you can kind of help them see that you might not feel like you're learning it, but you are getting smarter, if we use that term, when you're trying that hard. And so I shared with you already this quote from the article, just suggesting that you can improve your abilities a lot as long as you practice and use good strategies. And that we saw a big difference in withdrawal rates for students who are given this message versus a control message. But I always like to go back to student voices as much as I can. And I want to read a somewhat long email another one of our instructors got. Her name is Michelle Brock. She's at American River College in Sacramento. And this is one she got. My first time on the course website, I remember feeling really anxious and afraid. I wondered if I was going to succeed at this. And getting a 50 on that first test didn't help. I thought I'd never do well, and I felt so confused. But I told myself that I don't have to be the best right away. I just have to be better than I was at the beginning. I kept working, and I surprised myself. I did a little better on the next test, a 62. It wasn't a good enough grade, but I was at least relieved that I actually understood things better than before. I kept working hard, but the main thing I did was change the way I studied until I got it right. I did way better on my next two tests, B's and C's. I wasn't perfect. I had some major setbacks along the way. But by the end of the course, I was making A's and ended up getting a B overall in the class. It was really hard to see at the time, but all that confusion really paid off. It's like something I read about the brain. When you don't understand something, that's when your brain can grow the most. I really believe that now. I kept asking questions and talked to my instructor and the other students. It usually took a while for me to get things, but eventually I would understand. Looking back, I can finally see why the instructor let us struggle. She wanted us to understand things on our own. After a lifetime of thinking I can't do math, I finally feel like I can be good at this. And so this is after a year-long course. They do really become bonded in the class, and it's just very inspiring how much the student internalized this message. And one part, she does mention that writing activity, but I think there's also something that this instructor does that it goes beyond that. And we do see in the network, this is from all of our students, I think last fall, and we see that green is a growth mindset, yellow is kind of intermediate, red is definitely a fixed mindset. We do see a big increase in green from week 1 to 4, but it's not everyone. And so we actually looked, are there some faculty who are more effective at shifting students from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? So representing it differently, On the y-axis is a percentage of those who have a growth mindset in their classroom from the start of term to the end of term. And what you'll see, if you're looking there, is that there's this little cluster that's doing really well. And what they were doing is going beyond the growth mindset writing activity and creating this culture that supports a growth mindset. So not just this one-time activity, but changing the way they teach, changing their learning opportunities. Instead of providing just multiple choice, closed questions, they provide open questions, time for students to try out different strategies and make mistakes and learn from that. But they're also incorporating language to promote a growth mindset as well. So we found this combination of teaching students about this belief, using everyday language to talk about learning, as well as creating learning opportunities was really essential. And so we're going to focus today on the second one, only because the third is so discipline specific that it would be hard for me to coach all of you, and we would all come to a different place, which we should do. So let's focus again on the language aspect. So what we saw there is that one-time interventions are more effective if they're actively supported throughout the course. So if your messaging is consistent throughout. And this is really important for creating a classroom culture. So it's not only you who's delivering this message, but student to student as well. In fact, some of our faculty who have used this kind of approach, we hear students reminding each other about this in their groups. It's like, oh, you can do that. Have you tried this yet? There was one student, or one teacher, she was kind of apart from the study group, so she's just doing something else, and someone approached a study group and said, can I have the answer for number 5? And I said, well, no, but we can show you a strategy for how to do it. And she just did this happy dance. That they're actually helping one another with this kind of thinking. And so I mentioned earlier about really thinking about our language when we're praising students and offering encouragement when they're struggling. And to think about, our best intentions and how they'll appear to them as well as to us. So again, with the grading example I showed you before, sometimes, might not come off as we perceived it would be. But just always being user-centered there. So I did talk about this earlier, but the language that we focus on to start these conversations really emphasizes the process of learning, which again is composed of effort, help-seeking, and good strategies. And I talked about this, that in a study with Khan Academy and PERTS, we found that these growth mindset phrases did increase learning rates over the entire fractions module that these students were engaged in. But how do you actually do this? Here's some tips. One thing that we found to be really nice is using we in phrases and not just you. We can reach this standard of this class. This is a shared standard. I'm not just isolating you. So this establishes group norms. That does not mean that you need to change every you to a we, because they are the ones who will do the work. But say, we have a high standard, let's help you achieve that. So again, emphasizing that we're all in this together. Another thing is to emphasize that the process can take time. So sometimes when we've come up with phrases, we tested these out for a few years, we'll say, oh, you got that so quickly, your effort paid off. Like, oh, wait, no. We don't want to emphasize that quickly. It does take time to learn. So you want to be realistic about the learning process so they have those expectations in check. So it does take time to learn. And then one thing I really recommend is create and commonly refer to a public list of strategies that are effective for your discipline. And so that might be different, in your beginning class versus an intermediate versus an advanced class. And one thing you can do is actually just ask your students, like, how did you study? What did you find effective? And they might say, oh, this book was really good for this, but this other book, things about resources, maybe the tutors, they use them in a different way. Maybe they really like self-regulated learning, maybe study groups. So you can get this list. And so when they're feeling like, I don't get any of this, they might have a starting spot to go from. Okay, so before we get into our activities, just going back through a couple examples. So praise after success, you're improving and using some good strategies. Your efforts are really paying off. It'd be great if you can name the strategies so you can go, you used that. That was great. So they know that that's what you're talking about, instead of, I'm glad this was so easy for you. Why don't we like that one so much? Any guesses?
Wasted their time.
May not have been easy.
I was gonna say waste their time if they give them easy stuff.
Yeah, waste their time. Carol Dweck, actually, I watched her speak once, and she said, instead of saying that, you should apologize.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so sorry. I wasted your time. I underestimated your ability. Let me give you something that's actually challenging for you. She's really apologetic about it. It's a completely different attitude than, maybe some of the things I've said. So yeah, it's, emphasizing that it's easy, which is not the goal. The goal is to learn again. Yeah?
I was just gonna say also, the next time they run into a problem that's harder,
Mm.
it's gonna make them feel,
Yeah.
they won't feel as confident.
Yeah.
This is not so easy.
Yeah, it's supposed to be easy, right? If it's not easy, I'm doing something wrong, or something like that. Exactly. Yeah.
I hope I'm not slowing you down when I ask the question. Is it okay if I ask?
No, sure.
But isn't there a point you get to when you create a certain mastery?
Oh, yeah.
And work really hard and grit where it will be easy.
Yeah.
And that's the payoff for all the grit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent point, and we do have. I don't know if I have examples on this deck, but we've definitely talked about that. But one thing to do is emphasize where to go next. So one problem sometimes with the grit narrative is like you really get really good at this one task and this one specific subset, but you're not really thinking about how to synthesize that with everything you're learning, or once you do master that, what you're going to do next. So yeah, you do want to acknowledge mastery. So you are doing that really fluently and expertly. Let's try this next and see how you like this challenge. Let's try and apply your skills here, but definitely a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and the encouragement that can come from their peers, you mentioned that. One thing I do, and sometimes I forget to do it at the end of the term, and I'm always annoyed when I do, but is to ask students to spend a few minutes writing messages to the incoming students in the next term.
Mm-hmm.
What was helpful, how did they feel to be real?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've created that culture, because that is so credible, you pass those out in the first day of class with permission, with the understanding that we shared, and it's really helpful.
Yeah. So, it's actually more impactful if the students are carrying that message forward. Yeah. Just a couple more examples before we get on with that. But again, encouragement after difficulty. Again, reframing the meaning of struggle. I mentioned this during lunch, but struggling is a part of learning. It doesn't mean you can't get it. It means you're making connections that are not yet strong. And instead of, you would have done better had you tried harder, because that might not be true. Again, these are examples our faculty have donated for us. Really nice. But, that might be true, but I don't know if that's true, and it's not really that actionable. You might want to say that, if you had asked me for help sooner, I could have maybe helped you get on a better track, but then quickly move away from that. You don't want to just shame them and then end the conversation. But well, now that you've come here, let's talk about what we can do next, how we can work together. So again, no shaming of students, and we don't know if trying harder would have helped. Okay, so a little bit of participation and warm you up for your partner activity. Do we think this one is growth or not growth? Overall, you're really smart, but maybe you're not a math person. Yes or no? No, okay, good. Paying attention. Yeah, a math person is a key giveaway. And then we're saying overall you're smart, but you can't be smart at math. There's just some things some people aren't smart at, which isn't true. That's not what the neuroscience actually supports. So how about this? See, you do have the skills. Now we're going to strengthen them. So yes or no? So yes or no? I'm going to wait until everyone votes. I'm sorry. Okay, some mediums. So this is one where you need to consider the context. When would I say this to a student? I do want you to think about that. I'm going to have you go through a worksheet with some phrases that maybe not every conversation starter is a growth mindset phrase in every situation. So it's not a hard and fast rule. So if this student, for example, comes in with some knowledge that, again, you already brought up my example, but if they have mastered a task, Let's try and strengthen those skills. Let's hone them to more. But it could be considered not a growth mindset in other ones where you're just like, see, that's the outcome. Let's just keep doing more of that. So it really depends on the task that they're engaged in and that student themselves. So I do want you to think about that as you're going through. And I'm going to give you this worksheet activity. So it's double-sided. And what you're going to do is read through the phrases on this worksheet. And you're going to first identify if you think this is growth mindset or not. And then in what situation it would be a growth mindset phrase. So not just, yes, it is, no, it's not, but then the situation. If it is not, I want you to rewrite it so that it is. I do want to debrief just a little bit from the worksheet before we go to our final instance in which you will be talking with your group again. It's just more in a pressured manner. I will just leave that there. For the worksheet, are there any one of these that you and your partner are in disagreement with? Something that you had a prolonged conversation about? Any of them? One on here? Yeah? So anyone want to give me a number? Just number 9. I'm glad that you're growing and the work is becoming easier for you. Just a thumbs up, thumbs down. Let's see. Growth, not growth. So yeah, it's got mix. Cool. I love this activity because I purposely put in things that could go either way. So I want to hear from those who say yes. Let's hear from the yes people. It's growth mindset. What do we like about it?
Well, you're acknowledging that they're growing,
Mm-hmm.
and at some point, you don't say it's easy, it's easier, and the next sentence would be, now we need to look at how we can challenge you, whatever. But at times you got to celebrate success,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a word people understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that it's easier for you, it's relative to them.
Mm-hmm. For those who said no, does that kind of change your mind a little bit? If you added more of a follow-up.
Yeah.
Yep. Or
I said, no, it wasn't growth mindset
because it didn't have.
habits that now what we can switch to better yourself.
Yeah, excellent. So there, yeah.
For me, I changed it to I'm glad I recognize or I want to acknowledge this about you because I think sometimes when we say, oh, I'm glad about this, the opposite of that is like, oh, I'm really disappointed, I'm frustrated because you're still not getting it.
Yeah.
And so many of our students want to please us.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a little bit nervous sometimes.
With the glad.
Or I'm happy.
Yeah. That is actually a really good tip in general, is that if you would not say the opposite of what you just said, maybe you shouldn't say it. So if you're like, I really hate that you didn't do this, you might not say that. So I recognize that you did. You could also say I didn't recognize that and be admitting something else. So I like that, recognize. What about another one? Let's do one more before we go next. Yeah. 17.
We think 17 was a snarky G.
So 17 is snarky. So you got a low score. Doesn't mean you can't get this. It means you have a chance to learn a lot. And I just want to see thumbs up, thumbs down. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, I see. Middle. Okay, so we got some thumbs down. So we think it's snarky. What else? In the back, I saw some thumbs down.
It just sounds kind of manipulative, honestly.
Yeah? So,
The BS meter is always really important as a teacher. If students feel like you're manipulating or lying, I think you've lost
yeah.
the ability to influence them.
Yeah, so you might, it's not natural in a conversation about improving, you're trying to get something from them. So it doesn't ring true to you, which is fair enough reason to not use it.
And it doesn't affirm their disappointment either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you may be actually disappointed that you got a low score. So
Yeah.
all those things are the knee-jerk.
Yeah, it's that you kind of flippant about their low score, maybe. How about people who liked it? What part of it did you like? Not saying you shouldn't like it. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
But, it might be something I would say in response to like a pre-test at the beginning of the semester to kind of shape
Mm.
the future. Hey, probably you all got this. A lot to growth.
So in that case, getting a low score actually isn't too big of a deal. So you're trying to convey that. So that might be a different situation than, something where it was a high stakes test. And you'd be like, so you got a low score. I'm like, no, you got a low score. Let's work on that. And then,
I think we agreed that it was snarky, but we thought it was also honest, and that's why we considered it reasonable.
Yeah, so it's honest.
Acknowledging the low score and not pretending otherwise.
So it might be a little snarky, might be a little manipulative, but the whole idea is that even if you identify these as growth, that you probably aren't going to just go repeat these verbatim, but just get a practice of how to start conversations. And that's what we're going to do next. Great segue. So we're going to move into what I like to call the lightning round. Because, as I was just mentioning, you don't get to walk around your sheet of paper when your student says, I can't ever get this, I get it better than, whatever. You're like, hold on. Oh, this. You don't get 20 minutes to figure out a phrase with a buddy. You just kind of have to say something. And, I still sometimes say, oh, you're so smart. And then you kind of have to do that, the thing where you catch yourself, like, because you tried some good strategies and came office hours, and that was great. So it's okay. We have a growth mindset ourselves. So you might say some things that you're like, kick yourself for later. But that's why we're going to practice now is I'm going to give you a situation, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk with your buddy. That is still too long and awkward for real life. Most often you won't have a buddy like, hold on, student, let me go confer with someone else about what I will say to you. But we're practicing, we're going to get there, we're developing some strategies. So are we ready for the first one? Are we ready? Yeah. Okay, here we go. Your student is very upset. You ask why, and she says, everyone else gets it so much faster than me because they're smarter than I am. I'll never be able to do this. So you have 30 seconds. Go. Okay, does somebody have something? They could start a conversation with this student. Any phrase that came to mind? How would you start a conversation with this student? Yes?
Ask a question back. What makes you think that they are getting it faster than you?
Let's understand the problem. What makes you think that, and start a conversation there. What are some other things? Yeah.
We have to somehow get to the idea and break, have them move away from this notion of fast equals smart. And sort of be trained to, because that's societal. It's more in terms of society as imposing these notions of product and achievement. But this is just societal pressures. It might be different cultures. Somehow we have to learn. And I don't have the response immediately, but I guess the idea of training myself how to react to that somehow in a positive way.
So in that notion, yeah.
Well, it's very globalizing. Everyone else.
Everyone.
I'll never. And that's probably very much how they feel, but it's probably not reality.
And so what would you say?
Other people that are also struggling with it, and everybody has their own life experiences, and so let's just focus on how to get you where it makes sense to you.
So again, bringing that's a good time to use you, instead of the we as before. It's you. You're learning. Let's focus on you. So that's great. One more.
I just thought there was a huge opportunity in that last sentence. I'll never be able to do this. Oh, awesome. Explain what this is, and let's work on this. What is this?
Yeah, let's talk about this.
Positive reinforcement. Wow, you're really explaining this pretty well.
Yeah. You seem to know something about this. Yeah, as you ask more questions, like, are you sure you don't know anything about this? You can dig deeper. So I do like questions a lot. So now that we're warmed up, let's try another one. So this one, it's about math, but doesn't have to be. Again, I steal these from our faculty I primarily work with. So a student comes to you in the office hours at the start of the quarter, so we have some quarter colleges, but start of the semester, and says, I'm really dumb at insert subject here, or writing, or math, or whatever it is. I was never a math person. What's something that you can say to this student who is never good at the subject that you teach? So 30 seconds, go. So who has a suggestion for us? What will you say to this student? We got voluntold over here.
Well, for me, it kind of became a relatability thing that I used to feel that way myself. But then I learned my learning style and how I could overcome that, and now I'm here Because
Yeah.
for me, honestly, I used to say that when I was an undergraduate.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
I-
had to learn it in my master's, so you kind of have to figure it out.
Yeah, so telling about yourself, your journey. Again, sometimes they'll see us and like, you just, were born with a PhD or born master's degree. What would you know of my struggle? And, it's actually talking to them about yours and seeing, common ground. So I think that's great. What else? Yeah.
Can't you get a testimonial from someone who overcame this from previous and now is a math tutor or something?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can't you get somebody's story to
Mm-hmm.
help you?
Yeah, and so that was one example is your own story, but pulling from other stories. There's famous examples, like where people dropped out of high school and then they tried something different and learned skills that way. You can go to those kind of stories as well. Yeah.
It's almost an invitation to find out what their story is. There's a long story that has allowed them to conclude that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to find out more about why the student? Yeah, so that's a good instinct. You don't want to say some general placebo statement, but you do want to ask them, why do you think that? What's, in your background that suggests that?
I usually start exactly there, because I do teach math. And this is liberal studies students, this is a quote from my class. So my usual question that seems to work for me anyway is to say, tell me when you first started thinking that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually find out it was either second grade because they couldn't regroup in subtraction, third grade or fourth grade where they had trouble with multiplication factors they thought fast was smart.
Mm-hmm.
And then long division, and then fractions. And by then I knocked out a lot of the problems.
Yeah.
So usually they can identify it and then we talk about what they can do.
Yeah. So yeah, you switch it to something more productive, more actionable after that. Yeah.
And after I've had a chance to hear kind of what their feeling is for this, I try to praise them for doing something really wise and beginning a conversation with the teacher, because there is, I even share that one of my own children is dyslexic, and we realized early that people learn in different ways. Doesn't mean you're not smart. We just need to do something that works for you, and we're going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we have people, not just me on campus, but others, and I can introduce you to other students who felt just like you did, and we're going to get you through. If you will work and show up regularly, we'll find a way through this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that a lot. And just picking up on that student came to you at the beginning of class and just keep coming back. And then, so you want to keep that connection open, and so you also can work on belonging there as well. Okay, are we still ready for another one? Got a couple more? Okay. You're roaming around while groups are working. Now you have a new scenario. Your students are working in groups. That might change how you respond or might not. You hear students say in their groups, "This is so confusing. Why can't I understand this?" Okay, 30 seconds. Go ahead. Oh, great. So we're going to respond to our student when they're working in groups. What can you say? How would you start a conversation?
I might take the opportunity to turn into a little group activity. So I'm glad to hear that this is a topic of confusion for you. Why don't you each come up with a question regarding this topic, and we can address it as a class when we come back together.
So yeah, you actually solicit questions and being open to working on that as a class, and make it a group activity. So you're taking the focus off that one student, which could be good in that situation.
I want to know what this is.
What is this?
You got to talk about that. Is it the group dynamic? Is it context, or is it the topic, or what part of the topic?
Yeah, so what actually, is it about this? And then,
if I'm working in groups, if I have my students working in groups, oftentimes I'll stop here and say, can I have everybody's attention? How many people are confused by this? And if half the room, the hands go up, it's like, okay, maybe I didn't do a good enough job of explaining this to you. Let's go to the board and maybe map it out, because some people are visual learners.
yeah, and actually taking that poll, it's not just, you asked that question, that was really helpful. And so you're then highlighting that, yeah, please ask me, tell me something's confusing, we can work on that as a group.
You're promoting students to come forward all the time in your classroom, that you're setting a culture that is that, that I could make a mistake and not give you enough information, but you coming forward and asking is always valued.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, one more.
This is the right thing to do, but I would tend to validate the student and say, yes, this is a very hard concept go from there,
Mhm.
rather than, kind of scoffing at their confusion. Is that a good strategy, or does it work the wrong way?
I think acknowledging that students' feelings are valid is always a good starting point. Like, you could be confused by this. I might not say that it is objectively challenging or objectively hard, but that you can understand that it is challenging, and as we're first learning it, many things are really confusing and challenging. So I don't really recommend labeling for the long term, and that's actually our next situation is thinking about that. But yeah, acknowledgement that they're feeling confused is definitely good. You don't want to just, again, it goes back to, so you got a low score. They might be really upset by that. You want to acknowledge that. And so I'm going to move to our last lightning round, because we only got 3 minutes left, and I want to give you a little bit longer. Is actually, you're going to introduce a topic that you know from experience is challenging. How do you do that? And so I'm going to give you a minute to talk about this one, because you usually do have a little more prep. But this is a topic that you know from your experience that's particularly challenging for students. How are you going to introduce it in a way that promotes a growth mindset? So I'm going to give you 1 full minute, and go ahead. But what is something that you guys thought of? How are you going to introduce this challenging topic?
I'm going to lean on Viktor Frankl that you introduced. If we know the why, we're willing to sweat it. So I might tell a story of the relevance of it.
Yeah, so actually go back, why are we even bringing up this topic? And, have them maybe think about how it relates to them. I like it. So you're establishing that reason. What else did we think of? I saw a lot of chatting. Yeah.
Well, I just like to kind of lay in the groundwork, a lot like what Bob said, is in terms of, this is very important for you guys to get this, so I want to make sure that it's clear to you. Kind of going out of your way to let them know that you're going to be working hard in the next few minutes or whatever, few days, to really help them get it. I don't know, it works when I work with faculty, so.
Yeah. Worth trying. Then you, and then you. So
I would say this is a challenging topic. I would say, I will work hard for that, like what you say. But I also expect you all, when you're not in classroom, off classroom, spend more time to work for this problem and prepare and do extra research about that. And bring the questions, bring the most difficult parts, come to class, we share that. And then work that with, collaborate that with. It's just, work.
yeah. And talking a little bit about expectations, but also what you're going to do. You want them to bring the questions in, and I really like that, just being open to hearing that. And then you had a suggestion.
I might lean on a strategy like a KWL chart
Mm-hmm.
to draw on their prior knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and see what they want to know about this particular thing, and then maybe at the end of that class, see what they learned in that class session.
And so again, linking that up with what they know, maybe what they're interested in. I like a lot of setting the tone, good expectations. Anything else that people came up with?
Yes, one of the things I do for challenging math topics is to start with a problem that is accessible at many levels. So that you could do it calculation-wise, but you could draw pictures, or you could build to it, so that everybody can do the problem, and then we have to make connections.
So they can see the concepts and make that a little more clear. Does anyone go the route of not even mentioning that it's challenging?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so some do that, and it's your choice. But if you do know they need to maybe spend a little more time, or they'll have more questions, it's up to you and your class. So again, I always leave that up to you. Now I'm 2 minutes over, so I do want to say that you should, in addition to the phrases, the language that we're using, these conversation starters, is to think in your classroom about your learning opportunities, the everyday lessons, the problems, types of assignments, types of discussions that you have, and just thinking through that. Are you providing opportunities for multiple voices to join with multiple strategies? Can people be wrong in your class and that's okay because they're growing? Things like that. Your grading practices. I was talking about with somebody who doesn't grade on a curve, because then it helps make students think they're competing against each other rather than cooperating. And so there's decisions like that, but just thinking about all those different things that combine together to create your classroom environment. Now we'll leave that as your homework, but you can always email me questions, ideas, things you're working on, and thanks so much for having me. It was really fun.
Bravo.